Dear students, in this video I'll be explaining Act 1, Scene 1 of Merchant of Venice. This is the opening scene of the play. This scene takes place in a street in Venice, and initially there are three main characters in the play: Antonio, Celerino and Salanio. Antonio is a merchant in Venice, and Celerino and Salanio are his friends. So in the very opening lines of the play, Antonio says, "In sooth, I know not why I am so sad." In sooth means in truth, means truly, he says, I do not know that why I am feeling so sad. He doesn't know the reason of his sadness. So in the beginning of the scene, we read that Antonio is in a very sad and depressive mood, and he doesn't know the reason for his sadness. It wearies me, you say it wearies you. It wearies me means that this sadness makes me tired. And he says that you say that it wearies you. He says that this feeling of sadness makes me depressed, and you say that it depresses you too. But how I caught it, found it, or came by it, what stuff it's made of, whereof it is born, I am to learn. He says that I am yet to learn that where I had this feeling from, how I found it, and how I came across it, and what it consists of, and how it originated. How it is born means what is the reason behind this sadness. He doesn't know that. He's saying I am yet to learn that. So what does Antonio say about his sadness in the beginning of the scene? If you get such question, so you will write that he doesn't know the reason of his sadness. He tells his friends Celerino and Salanio that it makes me tired, and you says that you are depressed because of my sadness. He says that it makes me depressed. Rather, you say that you are depressed because of my sadness. Then he says that where I had the feeling from, or found it, or got it, and what it consists of, how it originated, he's yet to learn that. He's yet to know that. So he doesn't know the reason, that from where he got his sadness, from where it originated, what stuff it is made up of. So this is what he says about his sadness. In addition to this, he says, and such a want with sadness makes of me. Want means an absent-minded fellow. He says that this sadness, this depression makes me dull fellow, that I have much ado to know myself. Ado means trouble. He says that I am facing lots of trouble to know who I am. So this sadness is making him so dull, so that he is losing his own identity. If he is facing trouble in knowing, he fails to know who he actually is. So this is the kind of sadness that Antonio is suffering from. So initially, in the starting of the play, we come to know that Antonio is very sad, and he says that truly I do not know, I know not why I am so sad. He doesn't know the reason of his sadness. He says it wearies you. He says that it depresses you, it depresses me, and you say it depresses you. He says that you say that make you depressed too. His friends are also sad, depressed because of Antonio's sadness. They are also tired or sick of his sadness. But he says that how he got this sadness, where he found it, how he came by it, what stuff it is made up of, from where it is originated, he is yet to learn. He doesn't know from where he got that sadness. He is yet to know that. And such a want with sadness makes of me. He says this sadness is making me dull. And he says he's facing lots of trouble in knowing who himself is, because he's made so dull because of the sadness. On hearing this, Celerino, his friend, says, your mind is tossing in the ocean. He says he's probably trying to give him reason that why he might be sad. He says that your mind is at sea, since he's a merchant and most of his ships, his argosies, are at sea. So he's saying that your mind is wandering at sea. You are worried about your business and sea. So that is the reason probably what Celerino gives that is why Antonio might be sad. There were your Argoses with portly sail. So Argoses means that big commercial ships. He says that your mind is tossing at ocean, your mind is wandering at ocean, where your rich ships are with portly sail. Portly means stately. He says that your ships that are filled with cargo and move on waves like signors and wealthy citizens. Says that your mind is on the ocean where your ships are like signors and rich burghers on the flood. So he's saying that your ships, signors means gentlemen, burghers means important citizens. So he's saying that Salarino is comparing his rich, big commercial ships to gentlemen and important citizens. He says that your ships are filled, means in the ocean your ships are filled with cargo, move on the waves like great lords, like great gentlemen and wealthy citizens, or as it were the peasants of the sea. So he's comparing his ships to the gentlemen and important citizens, and he's saying that as if they are peasants of the sea. Peasants means procession. So like you might have seen various procession moving around. So the scene at the sea is compared, scene at the ocean where the rich ships of Antonio are moving is compared to a procession. So you understand what is procession? Procession is a sort of gathering where lots of people move around. If I am giving you an example, like in our Hindu religions, there are jhankis, God is beautifully, decorated in Rath or so, and people move behind following the statues of God. So that is a procession. So Salarino is comparing the scene at ocean where there are huge ships of Antonio along with other small ships. So that scene is compared to a procession. So he's saying that your ships are peasants of the sea. Do overpeer the petty trafficker. Petty trafficker is a small commercial ship. Overpeer means surpass. He says that big ship of Antonio seem to be in a procession and they move about by surpassing the small commercial ships. So what does he say in these lines? That large ship of Antonio pass in a magnificent procession and they surpass the smaller ship. They rule over the smaller ships. That courtesy to them, and the small ship, they courtesy to them means they bow in respect and do them reverence, means they move up and down as if showing respect. So because of waves, the ships, smaller ships, they seem to move up and down because of the waves in the ocean. So Salarino compares that to that the small ships, they seem to be bowing in front of the big ships of Antonio as if paying courtesy or as if bowing in respect. As they fly by them with their woven wings. They here means ships of Antonio. And thus he says that the ships of Antonio, they pass with speed. Pass by them here means, by them means the smaller ships. The big ships of Antonio pass by the smaller ships with great speed with their canvas sails. So you might have seen the white cloth over the ships if you have seen ships in television. So there are white cloth of white sails that the ship have. So that are called woven wings. That are canvas sails. It says that the big ships of Antonio pass by the small ships as if in great speed and with their canvas sail. So what does Salarino say in this part? He says that your mind is tossing on the ocean. He tells Antonio that your mind is wandering in the ocean where your Argoses, that is the big ship, are present, and he compares his big ships to gentlemen and important citizens, on the sea. He says on the water, there your ships are like gentlemen and important citizens on the water, and they seem to be moving in a procession, and they seem to overpeer the smaller ships, and the smaller ships, they bow in front of them, paying them courtesy and respect, as they as the big ships of Antonio pass by the small ships with their woven wings. I'm repeating again what Celerino says in this part. He says that your mind is focused on the ocean, where your merchant ships are sailing like rich and important men, and they are parading on the sea. They are moving in a procession on the sea, and they surpass over the little small commercial ships, commercial boats, as if and it seems as if the small boats, they are bowing or paying reverence or respect to the big ships of Antonio as they pass by them with full speed with their canvas sail. Now moving on to next page. On the next page, Celerino speaks. He says, "Believe me, sir, had I such venture forth." He says that you need to believe me, if I had such business operation, the better part of my affections would be with my hopes abroad. He says that if I had such a business, my better part means my most of the feelings would be about the hopes abroad, means about my business. He says that if I had such a business venture, my greater part of thoughts would be fixed on my hopes abroad, because most of his ships are in different directions, they are abroad. So that is why Celerino says this. He says that if I were involved in a trade venture like yours, most of my thoughts would be with my ships. I should be still plucking the grass to know where sits the wind. He says that since, see, this play is of times when there were no modern means of communication. Now, so if you need to know what is happening in a country far away, you can just Google, or you can, just hear to the news of what is happening around. So you come to know. But in those times, there was no such means of communication. People could just, especially like merchants like Antonio, could just guess around. Said that by this time the ships might have reached at this place. So they they could just assume where their ships were, since they could not communicate. So he says that I would still be plucking the grass to know where sits the wind. So he's saying, because he says that holding up a blade of grass, blade means a spike of grass, to see which direction the wind is blowing. So since the ships would probably move in the direction of the wind, so he's saying that if I had a business like you, I would pluck the grass and float it in the air to see in which direction the wind is, and in the similar directions his ships would have been. Then he says, peering in the maps of ports and piers and roads. He says he would be looking carefully into the maps, and he would be looking the harbors and channels, and he would just try to make out where his boats or ships were, where his ships, rich merchant ships, were at that time. And every object that might make me fear misfortune to my venture, out of doubt would make me sad. He says that any object that might pose danger to my business would certainly make me sad. So he says he would be sad on seeing any object that would remind him of the misfortune to his ship. That things would make him sad. So this is how Celerino explains that what might be probable reason for his sadness. He says that if he had such a business like Antonio, most of his thoughts would be by his ships abroad that are scattered in different places. He says that he would be pulling up shorts of grass to check the direction of winds, Then he would be looking into the maps or ports and piers and roads to again check that where his ships might be, at which place his ships might be. And then at the last he says that any little thing that might remind him of the dangers to his ships would make him sad. Now, this is what Salanio says. Now, Salarino adds to the reasons, probable reasons that why Antonio might be sad. What does he say? Salarino says, my wind cooling my broth. His wind means his breath. Broth is soup. He says that when I blow upon my soup to make it cold. So, even you might have done that, especially in winters when you drink hot tea or hot soup. You blow inside that so that it cools fast. And what happens when you blow inside hot soup or hot tea or coffee? So waves are formed in the mug or in the cup, in whichever bowl, whatever you're drinking. So he says, when my wind cooling my broth would blow me with an ache, when I thought what harm a wind too great at sea might do. He says that when my breath cools my broth, when my breath cools my soup, when I blow upon my soup to make it cold, he says I would shiver with fear. So egg means the fever with shivering. He says that waves formed in that soup would make me shiver with the fever on imagining the damage a strong wind like that might cause to his ships. So he's saying he's reminded of the strong winds in the ocean. So the waves that are formed when he might blow in the soup, so that waves remind him of the waves that are caused by strong winds in the ocean, and he would shiver with fever on just a thought that what harm such strong waves would do to his ships in ocean. I should not see the sandy hourglass run, but I should think of shallows of flats. So he says that what is sandy hourglass? Sandy hourglass, you might have seen that also in movies, if not actually. It is an apparatus which has two spheres of glasses joined together, and there is a tiny hole in between through which the sand runs from one sphere to the other. And people in those times used to know about the time using that sandy hourglass. So he says that whenever I see that sandy hourglass, it reminds me of shallows and flats. Shallows are shallow waters and flats are sandbanks. So again, if the ship gets struck with shallows or sand hourglass, they would be destroyed. They would meet with an accident. So on seeing the sandy hourglass, he is reminded of shallows and flats. That could cause misfortune to his ventures, to his ships. So first he says that what reminds him of the danger in the sea? First thing, his wind cooling his broth. Means when the wind, his own breath causes waves in the broth. So that would make him shiver with fever on thinking that what harm such great waves would cause to his ships. Then next he says, when he sees an sandy hourglass, he is reminded of shallows and flats. And he says that, and see my wealthy Andrew docked in sand. Docked means run ashore or stuck in sand. He says that on seeing the sandy hourglass, he is reminded of shallows, and he would be reminded of shallows and flats, and he could actually see a picture of his wealthy Andrew, that is his wealthy ship, docked in sand. It would meet with an accident by getting stuck in that shallows and sandbanks. Veiling her high top lower than her ribs. So the position of ship is described. High top is veiling means to lower. High top is the mast of the ship. What is the mast of the ship? The topmost area of the ship is called the mast of the ship. So ribs are the sides of the boat, side of the ship. Sorry. So he says that when a ship gets stuck in the sand, the high top of the ship is lowered than the sides of the ship. So this is the position, as if to kiss the sand. To kiss her burial means as if it seems as if it is kissing the sand in which it is buried, right? So what is he reminded of when he sees a sandy hourglass? He is reminded of shallows and flats, and he says that he could actually see his wealthy ship docked in sand, and its lower is its high mast is lower down than her ribs. See, ship is personified here. It's called her. He says that when the ship is docked in sand, he could actually see the ship wailing, that is lowered down, that her topmost part is lowered than her sides, as if it seems to kiss the sand. Should I go to church and see the holy effidies of stone, and not bethink me straight of dangerous rocks? Should means, he says, if. Should in the beginning means if. He says, if I go to church and see the holy effidies of stone. Holy effidies means building. He says whenever he goes to a church, he would go to a church, he would see a building made up of stone, and he would straight away think of dangerous rocks in the sea. He would imagine the dangerous rocks in the sea, and that would again make him sad. Why? With touching but my gentle vessel's side would scatter all her spices on the stream. So he says that if that rocks, vessel here means ship, if that rocks happen to even touch his ship's side, what would happen? Would scatter all her spices on the stream. He says that if his ships happen to hit the stones, the huge rocks in the sea, what would happen? They would scatter all her spices on the stream. See, the ships were filled with different kinds of objects. For example, they were as according to the scene here, his ships were filled with the spices. You understand? Spices are the your mother uses spices to cook food. So spices, his ships were filled with spices, and then his ships were filled with silks. He says that if his ship happened to touch the rocks, if his ship happened to hit the rocks, what would happen? All the spices that are loaded in the ships would scatter in the ocean. And robe the roaring water with my silks. If the vessel was filled, if the ships were filled with silk clothes, what would happen? The water, the silk cloth would enrobe. Enrobe means cover. He says that the silk clothes would cover the roaring water of the ocean. In a word, but even now worth this and now worth nothing. He says, in short, it makes me think that at one moment I have so much, and the next moment I have nothing. So he says this is the probable reason of your sadness. Salarino is trying to explain Antonio that why he might be sad. He says that you are sad because your ships are surrounded by lots of dangers. Even a thought of your ships meeting with an accident would make you sad. He says that, in short, he says that at one moment you have so much, you have so many ships, you have so much money invested in your ship. In case your ship meets with an accident, meet with an accident, what would happen? In the very next moment, you are left with nothing. In case you face so many losses, you will be left with nothing. And this is what actually happened later in the scene, later in the play. What happened later in the play? He is a rich merchant of Venice. He has so much of money. No, anybody would lend him money. He's very sure about that. He's very sure that he would return the borrowed money and before the bond gets expired later. But what happened actually? Because all his vessels, all his ships met with accident, he was left with nothing. So that is what Salarino is trying to say. He says that you are sad because he makes it short by saying that at one moment you have so much, and next moment you have nothing. If your ships meet with an accident, you'll be left with nothing. Shall I have the thought? He says that I can imagine, if I can imagine all this could happen, I think on this I shall lack the thought that such a thing be chanced would make me sad. He says that if I can imagine all this could happen, shall I not also have the imagination to picture the grief which the occurrence of such a disaster would cause me? He says that if I can imagine that everything like this could happen, he says that if I can imagine that, your ships would meet with an accident and in a second you will lose everything. So he says that I can also imagine that why you are so sad. So he says that I can know the cause of your sadness. That is what he's trying to say. But tell not me. I know Antonio is sad to think about his merchandise. He says that I very well know the reason. He says I know that Antonio is sad because he's thinking of his rich cargoes. He says that I know you are sad because you are worried about your business. So I am quickly repeating whatever Celerino has said in this part. He says that when I blow upon my soup to make it cold, I shiver with fear on thinking what damage such a strong wind might cause to my ships, my vessels. And then he says that side of the sandy hourglass would make him think of shallow waters and sandbags. And these would make him imagine that his loaded ships are stuck in sand, are grounded in sand, with this high top, that is the mast, lowered than her sides, means as if they are kissing the sand that surrounds her. So he's very clearly picturizing the picture of a ship that is stuck in sand, that is stuck in the sandbanks, that has met with an accident. So that is what he's saying in this. Then he says that if he goes to a church and see the holy building of stone, it makes him think of dangerous rocks. And he says then makes him imagine that if his ship get hit with that dangerous rocks, if the sides of the ship get hit with the dangerous rock, it would scatter the ship along with the spices that would again scatter on the water, and the silk would also scatter on the waves. In short, he says that it makes him think that at one moment he has so much and in the very next moment he is left with nothing. Then he says that if I can imagine, he says if he can imagine all this could happen, he can also imagine the sadness which this Antonio is going through. He can very well imagine the grief, the depression and the sadness that Antonio is going through. And he says that he is sad because he is thinking upon his merchandise. He is sad because of his business. On hearing all this, Antonio says, "Believe me, no. I thank my fortune for it. My ventures are not in one bottom trusted, nor to one place, nor is my whole estate upon the fortune of this present year. Therefore, my merchandise makes me not sad." He says that you need to believe me. It is not true. He says that I am not sad because of my merchandise. I am not sad because of my business. He says that I thank my fortune for it. He says I am fortunate enough that my ventures are not in one bottom trusted. He says that my business is not dependent on one ship. So he has so many ships that are scattered in different direction, not to one place. He says that my ships have not gone to one location. They are scattered at different situation. If one ship met with an accident, others are still safe. Nor is my whole estate upon the fortune of this present year. He says, nor does my financial position depend upon the profits of that current year. Therefore, my merchandise makes me not sad. So there are three reasons that Antonio gives stating that he is not sad because of his business. He says that his ships are not no, his business is not dependent on one ship, and then his ships are scattered, they are not on one place. And then third thing he says is that his financial position does not depend upon the commercial profit of that current year. That is why he is not sad because of his business. On hearing this, Celerino says, not in, sorry, Celerino says, why then? You are in love. Antonio says, Fifi says, okay, if you're not sad because of your business, then you might be sad because you're in love. On hearing this, Antonio says, Fifi, that means nonsense. It's all nonsense. That's not possible, he says. Celerino says, not in love neither? Then let us say you're sad because you're not married. He says, then it's very simple. If you're not in love, then you're simply sad because you're not married, because you're not happy. He says that you are sad because you're not happy. Then in that case, it's very easy to be happy. If you're not sad because of your business, then you are sad because simply because you're not happy. And it were as easy for you to laugh and leap and say you are merry because you're not sad. He says that in that case, it would be easy for you to laugh and jump about. Leap means to jump about, and say that you are happy because you are not sad. He says it's very simple for you to be happy. You should laugh, jump around, and say that you're happy, and you'll be happy. Say that you're not sad. Now by two-headed Janus. So who is two-headed? Janus is a Roman god of doors, and it is believed that it has two faces. One is a frowning face, a sad face. Other is a